Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Teague.
And I'm Betty Novak. We're glad to have you today.
Yes, welcome to Coffee with Two Coaches.
Yeah.
Betty and I are getting together today because we're talking about a phenomenon that I don't I don't personally remember happening in the past. It's something unusual, and but then again, we live in unusual times, so then this is just par for the course. We're going to talk about people who are basically unretiring. That they've worked all their lives, they saved up for retirement, they retired from their full-time job, and now they're saying to themselves, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And they're going back for work, and they're going back to work for many different reasons. Um,
Sure.
so so Betty, tell us a little bit about why some of these retirees are unretired now.
Okay. First, the obvious reason, right? We're in inflation
Mhm.
and people need the income. And, they're going back to their old jobs or trying to find a new job, like a new side gig, to be able to make some money, to be able to supplement um, their Social Security or their retirement, wherever they retired from. But the bigger issue is they're bored.
Mm,
They want to come. They want to come back and be social with people in the workplace, and they miss that, and they want to do the same or similar work that they did before and be paid. So that's more than 2 million retired during the last 18 months of the
wow.
pandemic. That's a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, because maybe they decided they needed to retire and, so they feel safe being at home. But it's described as quiet returning. And,
Mm,
uh, like people know quiet quitting, but this is quiet returning. And mainly it's the baby boomers, some Gen X, but the baby boomers that are coming back. And Michelle and I discussed it. I'm a baby boomer, and the baby boomers don't do anything that's logical, so to
yeah.
speak. They
Uh,
think outside the box type
They
of.
do. They think outside the box. They do things that previous generations haven't done before. So I shouldn't be surprised that it's the baby boomers who are deciding, you know what, we don't want to be retired anymore, and I'm going to come back to work. Uh, I cannot remember other generations doing this. I cannot remember a period of time where people said, oh, I'm going to go back to work because I don't want to be retired anymore. I'm too bored. Or even in the 70s, I don't remember hearing about a bunch of retirees returning back to work. And you had massive inflation back then. I don't
Yeah,
remember hearing about that.
double digit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you should say that because my grandmother worked all her life. They had a farm and then they had a store, and then my grandfather wasn't real good at money, and so they lost the store but rented to have the store. It was a nice little store with meat and everything. But that's where she learned her craft. And then as I would go to northern Minnesota every summer, she would take some time off for us, but the rest of the year she worked in the large supermarkets in Park Rapids. And she worked until she was 70 or so, even 80 into the 80s. So she she just wanted to work and
Mhm.
she needed money, but she wanted to work. She came from the ethnic ethic that you work until you can't.
Yeah. I
So
know Jim and my husband Jim, he and I have talked about retirement and I'm with the people who are unretiring. I would be bored stiff if I had nothing to do. And so I don't see myself retiring, and neither does Jim. Both of us have the mentality, if you can still work, you work. Because if you can still do it, and with what we do, like a lot of people out there, we have knowledge based jobs. We
Yeah.
don't have physically taxing jobs. So it's not that we can't physically do the job anymore. It's as long as the brain is functioning the way it's supposed to, you can still do the work. And so I don't see either one of us actually retiring. I could see us slowing down and maybe not working as many hours, but I don't think either one of us will ever fully retire.
Now we're sort of different. Marty's fully retired from the government, and I take Social Security. But how can I say this? He's busier than he ever was working in the federal government. I mean, right now he's starting to plan the garden, and he helps our next door neighbor get to his medical. And, he and I do things around the house, and he writes stories, which I'd like him to publish. So he's tired at the end of the day after he's been doing everything, but I don't see him as getting bored with retirement, but that's an unusual thing. And one of the things I learned when I was being trained to be a retirement coach at one time I wanted to be one, is that men, if they don't stay active, they have more of a propensity to actually get a get a major illness or to actually die. The
Wow.
women stay longer because they're sort of active anyway in their retirement, church and stuff. Um, so, but this is different. I mean, my generation, your generation are used to working.
Yes.
Nobody said we were going to get the golden watch.
No.
And so having done that, we're still working one way or the other. And a number of other adults like me and you, but have started figuring out some side businesses.
Yeah.
The gig economy has come. So
Yeah.
they're big into that.
Yeah. And the gig economy it was starting up before the pandemic happened.
Mhm.
And I think the pandemic actually pushed more people into the gig economy. And the reason why I say that is because you had companies that were shutting down. You had companies that pushed their employees out and told them to go virtual. And when you had that shift happen, I think the gig economy started to pick up steam because people had more time. And with the people who lost their jobs during the pandemic, they needed something to go to. They needed the income, so they found a side gig that would they could work while they were waiting to get back to work.
Yep.
And so I think all of that has contributed to a booming gig economy at this point.
Yep. I mean, like we said before, a certain percentage are returning to work because they need the money. Maybe
Yeah,
their retirement wasn't that much. Another group fears that inflation is eroding their retirement nest egg. So there's the ones that aren't, they don't have as much buying power
yeah,
as they need. And at my age, you go to a lot of doctor's appointments. So even though Medicare takes care of it, and then others return to work because they're looking for something to do, like we've been saying.
exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting because studies are showing that, and it's from a survey that Job List did, that almost 30% of people are returning because they need the money, and a little over 20% are returning because of that inflation rate. It's the 60% of the people who are returning because they're looking for something to do. I think that that's really interesting because they're bored. And like you said before, work is a huge part of our social life. It's a huge part of our social world. And when we don't have those connections, we're going to be looking for them. And that's the easiest place to find them. Um,
Yep.
half, more than half of the people who are returning to work, you got 52% of those that are quietly returning. They were happy to go back to work. And part of it is because they were learning, they're yearning for those social relationships. You had over 40% say they were excited to be back at a job. And that's interesting that because all you hear about when it comes to retirement are these stories about people who can't wait to no longer have to be on the job. And all of a sudden, you've got, over 40% of the people who are unretiring and going back to work are excited about it. And what's even interesting is almost 80%, you had 79%, they were returning back to work and they're just looking for part-time work. They're not looking to go back full-time. They're just looking to go back part-time. And with the number of job openings that are currently out there in the economy, this is a great time for retirees to quietly return to the workplace.
Yeah, and that they can negotiate how much they work because their former bosses need them because of the big resignation. And so they need the wisdom that the retirees took with them. So, but some of the retirees express that they're nervous and stressed and they're frustrated about returning to work because I think they're a little worried that maybe their skills have gotten old or rusty type of thing. So they may have some of these compounding concerns, but they want to come back because they want a structured environment.
Right.
They haven't, as a retirement coach, we work with our clients to have a structure during the day of what they're going to do in the week. But that's hard. I would say that's hard to do. So going back to work is easier because somebody else has created a structure for you. Yeah. So
Yeah,
some call, them returning to work as the unretired. They went back. So, and I think the ones that are thinking about retiring, they're wondering if they should retire at this point. And so we'll talk about this another time, but the millennials and the Gen X's and Y's now have a stop gap where they can't they have a wall because the returning retirees and those that are waiting to retire to see how the economy, comes back to normal, they just are staying where they are.
Yeah, one of the things, my generation, Generation X, we've been waiting for baby boomers to move on so that we could fill leadership roles and we could move up and our career could progress into those senior leadership roles. And now that you have baby boomers who are putting off retirement because of the economy, or the ones that are unretiring and coming back, like you said, there's literally this wall that is once again being built up by baby boomers that is preventing Generation X and Generation Y people from filling those roles. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next several years. Because like I said before, you've got this gig economy where people are going and making a living out of that. But I also think what's going to happen is Gen X and Gen Y are going to start their own businesses in a lot bigger percentage than what they've done in the past. And that's because they realize they can't move any further in the place that they're working now. They can't move up because baby boomers are still there.
Well, it's interesting you should say that too, because this morning I was watching a business channel and they had the CEO from Poshmark. And he was going through how many people were making a living, and some of them were making a 6-digit figure, dealing with Poshmark. And that would be an unusual person. But he talked about one lady who she worked Poshmark four days a week and went 1 day a week into work.
Wow.
So, yeah, and was making good money. So, creativity is not dead.
Right.
People can be flexible and resilient.
And to that point, we've been talking about all these people who are indeed unretired at this point, and they're moving on from the retirement. But literally, 1 in 6 retirees are thinking about returning to work. And when they're thinking about this, I'm sure there's a lot of repercussions or implications, if you will, when it comes to returning back to work once you have retired. So, what are some of the things that people need to think about if they're going to return to work after retiring?
Well, the big deal is Social Security, if you're on Social Security and Medicare, because there are some rules about this. For instance, older adults in the workforce, ages 65 to 74, they have to look at how much money they can make over their retirement. So in the 75 and older crowd, the portion in the workforce is expected to reach 11.1% and more. However, when you get, if you retire early, like some people are retiring at 55, if you retire early and go on to Social Security, you have to give $1 or $2 back for every dollar that you make, and so above your retirement. And that worried me for a long time, having to I take my Social Security, and I've been doing this business for a while. But it turned out that once you reach 67, I think it is, I think it's 67 and up, you don't have to do that. You can make as much money as you want, and you still will get your Social Security. So, but it also suggests that, do you want to make a lot of money?
Yeah.
Or do you want to get a job that is less stress, but alleviates your boredom? And maybe it gives you income, but you don't necessarily need it, because boredom is a really huge problem among the retired. So.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, when you have 1 in 6 retirees who are thinking about doing this, most of them, it's because they're bored. You've got some of them who need it for the money. A lot of it is because of inflation. Some of them are just feeling lonely. There was a study that was done by Paychecks, and they found that almost 45% of the people who are thinking about going back to work, they felt lonely, and it's because they don't have that social structure there anymore while they're still at home. You've got, like we said before, you've got over 50% who are bored. You have several of them that need the money, but when it comes to that Social Security, that can be a big hindrance for going back into the workplace. If all the money that you're going to earn, you're going to have to turn around and pay back to Social Security Administration. You have to get together with your CPA and with your tax advisors and figure out what's going to be best for me. Is it best for me to stay at home, or is it best for me to go back to work and see what I can do? Because the other thing is, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities out there. So if you don't need the money, but you do need something to not be bored or to be around other people, there are other opportunities out there for those people who are retired to do things and be around people and still contribute to the greater good.
And the other thing is that, Mendel said that so many people underestimate that going back. Even if you hate your job, it's a part of who you are and what you do. And in the previous life, your identity was attached to your job. But now, what you need to look at is also, besides the financial, is Medicare. If you're on Medicare, which unfortunately you have to be on Medicare when you are on Social Security. So in some instances, if you make a lot of money, you may have to renegotiate what your benefits are for Medicare. So
yeah, because there are some, because like you said, once you are on Social Security, you're automatically on Medicare. The problem is if you're going to work full time for an employer, more than likely they've got a health insurance plan. And you may want to pick up that health insurance because the more that you earn, the more you're going to end up having to pay with Medicare because they do means testing with Medicare.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so is it going to be worth it to continue to be on Medicare for you, or would it be worth it to go onto your employer's healthcare plan?
And I don't know that if this is happening, but when it was really, really competitive and people who had retired wanted to come back before the pandemic, the employers were looking at them and say, oh, good. Part of their compensation is medical insurance, and I don't have to pay it
Right.
because they're on Medicare. And I think the pandemic's messed up more than we know. So who knows, what they think, what we're supposed to do with regards to Medicare. So I have to go back and look at some of the rules too, again. But you don't want to trigger additional costs. But you can, if you opt out when you return to work, to go into the insurance for the employer that you're returning to. Then once you do retire again, you can go back in and apply for Medicare.
Right.
So it's not a one-way street where
No.
you're out. That's
No.
it, which is nice. It's good. So,
And it's there for a reason. Most employers will tell you to provide health insurance for somebody who's in their 60s or 70s. The premiums are just outrageous. So there's a reason why Medicare is there. And you're right. Uh, you're not going to do this job forever. If you are indeed unretiring and you're going back into the workplace, more than likely you're not going to do it for the next 10, 15, 20 years. You're only going to do it for a short amount of time before you re-retire, I guess will be the term. Uh, so it's a matter of what do you need, what's going to be best for you in the short run.
here's a personal issue. If you've been retired for a while and you're running around in t-shirts and pants and jeans and stuff, did you give away your suits?
Yes.
I didn't give away all my suits, but I don't use them here at all. But I'm still keeping them just in case I need them for some sort of event. But you might have to go back out and find some a suit or two. So when you're going to go back into the professional workforce, depending on, I mean, some jobs will allow you to down dress because that's the way they are.
Yes.
I mean, like teaching. Yeah, you don't have to dress up really anymore.
Exactly. So there are going to be expenses if you do end up going back out there into the workplace, because depending on what you're doing, you've got the commuting expenses, and believe me, the price of gas still isn't very cheap. You've got the time of getting to and from work plus being at work, and you've got meals that you're not going to be at home to eat. So you have to either bring your lunch or plan on buying lunch while you're out and about. So there are going to be expenses involved if you end up going back out into the workplace.
Well, I noticed even before the pandemic that what we would call gray hairs, right? That they were working at like Target and so forth, but they mainly stayed at the front because they could run a cash register, in this case, a digital one. And so they were able to, check people out pretty fast, and they used the younger people to stock and to manage the floor. So, but that was not neat to see that.
Yes,
So we're going to be seeing it again, obviously.
I think we are. All right, well, this has been an interesting conversation about people, like you said, unretiring and headed back out into the workplace. I think next time what we need to look at is the employer point of view of all of this. And because when employers are bringing these seniors back into the workplace, uh, they've got it may not necessarily go as smoothly as they think, especially if somebody has been out of the place for a few years now, and they've got to brush up on those skills, and they need to be reintroduced into what's going on.
Well, one of the things that, and we'll talk about it later, but one of the things that career coaches encourage is anybody who's coming back out of the pandemic, or as you say, a couple of years of retirement, is to learn, scope out where you want to go back. I mean, is it your current former job, or are you making a career change? And then learn, update yourself on definitely the computer skills, software skills, because the software systems is the part that changes like rapidly.
Exactly.
I mean, the personal skills, the social skills are there.
Yep.
We'll be talking more about that.
Oh yeah. So there'll be lots to talk about here, because like I said, this is something very different than what we've seen in the past. And so it's interesting what employers and those unretirees are doing as this is going, and it's evolving. It's something that employers didn't think about in the past, and now this is brand new for them. So we can talk about that on our next get together and our next session, and it'll be interesting, like I said, to see what exactly employers are doing for this.
Yep. And how the different gens are dealing with it. Eventually,
Exactly.
we'll talk about that too. So,
Exactly.
well,
All right,
thank
well,
you.
thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.